Welcome to Conscious Dominance, a DSRX studio production. These weekly conversations explore how to approach mindful leadership and inner dominance within the powerful container of committed, intentional relationships. Join Eric as he invites new dialogues, sharing practical insights for how the craft of consciousness opens the aperture to love, serve, and connect with unwavering presence.
All right. How does this sound?
You sound sexy.
Good. That's what I'm going for.
Andrew, it's good to see you. It's been a while. My friend in Texas. I believe that's where you are.
It's good to see you too. Yes, we are still in Texas. We'll be in Texas for a while before we bail out of here and go west.
Go west, young man. I'm in Missouri. This is show me state. So
Have you been showing? Have you been showing him?
Showing him. That's not really my thing to show him.
Welcome to the Exhibitionist Podcast.
Yeah.
Andrew Rundell.
Yeah, I'm more of the voyeur, less of the exhibitionist. The title of this is Conscious Dominance. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is this word authenticity. And really, like, what is it when we're the stereotype of the world of BDSM, or the dom and the sub, and there's this way that it looks and a way that you have to be, or there's a prescription of what that is. And it's like in any culture or any sort of thing that's out there, if you're coming into it new, often you're coming into an existing culture and an existing form and look with existing mandates and templates that we're not always even aware that we're prescribing to. And I think one of the things that I really want to call forward and just offer people listening is that the whole point of bringing consciousness to something is to provide yourself the opportunity to be in your authenticity. And so what's the point other than that? That's the point. The point is bring consciousness, which another way of saying consciousness is take responsibility, bring your presence to it, your integrity, all the different things we've talked about. And then once you have that, what do you do with that? To just go along with whatever everyone else is doing doesn't seem very conscious. If that's what you actually are and who you are and what you like and what you want to be, then great, but do it from a place of consciousness. And I think that's why it's important, this word authenticity. And I want us to really get into this word authenticity and just think about it as the author, what it is to be the author of your life. So anyway, what do you feel when you hear that word? What do you think?
People ask Dawn and I all the time, are you a part of the BDSM community? Are you a part of the community? And my answer is always the same. It's no. I don't want to join a community to figure out how to be a part of my relationship. We do this all the time, whether it's in these kinds of relationships or anywhere in life, right? We do this thing where, okay, there's something that I want. How do I do that? How do other people do that? Okay, so you start to formulate these ways that you think you need to act in order to be the thing that you want to be. And it's this pattern that we all do it in every part of our lives until we start to see it. We can't choose any differently. There's nothing wrong with this because we can't do it any differently until we see it. But we do this thing where it's like we form this identity around acting out or playing the role of the thing that we want, rather than just being ourselves in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like to be authentic in anything means you have to do it your way for you in a way that fits your life and does what you, it's you doing what you want to do, not acting out or playing out a role. And this is the thing. You go to, if you were to go to any kind of like a munch, so to speak, in the BDSM community, you see a whole bunch of people who are all looking the same, acting the same, dressing the same. You follow any kink accounts anywhere on Instagram or anywhere else, and it's just the same vibe of the way that people look and the way they dress and the way they act. And yeah, it's all just they're playing a fucking game. I just can't handle it because it's not me. I'm not going to play that game or be put in those boxes.
Correct. But if people are into that and that's authentic to them, that's fine. And
the thing that most people don't do is ever question those boxes that they put themselves in. They don't question those roles or the way that they act. We're in Texas right now. Dawn and I are from Minnesota. We grew up in Minnesota. We've been in Minnesota our whole lives. And you see this thing that happens with people who move to Texas. They start wearing cowboy hats. They start wearing cowboy boots. I want to be a Texan, so I start doing the things that Texans do. And it's this jump that gets made from who I am to what I do. And it reminds me of this quote that I heard one time where how most people approach life is what I do plus how I do it equals who I am. And it's the wrong equation because you're wrapping your whole I am up in what you do and then judging yourself by how well you're doing the thing.
And I think especially in this Instagram world and world of social media and online world, so much done for a performative basis. So you do the thing so it looks a certain way and appears a certain way so that you fit in that little box. You're playing that particular little game. It's very much like high school. Like when you're in high school, there's these groups. There's the jocks and the goth and the this and the this and then this. And you fit in these categories, or you listen to a certain type of music and then you dress a certain way. And I think our call out is that's fine if that's actually the path that you are, but don't be confined by that. Like you could be and look any way you want to look and be interested in the dynamics of dominance and submission and in a relationship. It doesn't need to look aesthetically like the way it looks. You don't need to be a part of that community or even look like that. You could look very vanilla, very plain, very boring or whatever. Or like me who wears flannel and do construction and I don't fit in the box of that, Yeah.
We don't either. And I think the funniest thing on this line that has ever happened to Dawn and I is when this woman a couple of years ago said to us on Instagram, "You two don't look like dumb sub. You look like you should be Sunday school teachers." Which is funny because Dawn used to actually be a Sunday school teacher.
Right. No, for sure. And I think that's the point of, I remember when we did that whole episode about integrity, and I love your expansion of the definition of integrity. Please go listen to that episode if you haven't. But there was a wonderful definition that you brought forth. It was really much your definition of it, which was the act of being authentic to yourself, to figure out who you are and then living your values, who you are, what you're about, and integrating that. So it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Then you become this composite whole that's very much you as an individual. That's actually integrity, not integrity to some sort of external form that's out there. That who's the barometer of that? The judge, social media or this? They're on to the next thing. You can see that even the climate now, everybody's like, oh, no more of this. We're on to this and then this. And it's all, you don't even know where you are when you're constantly in the winds of all that.
Right. It's why this world feels so unsolid, why it feels so ungrounded, because everyone is just playing a part. They're just playing a role. And we're all desperate for something that's real, something that isn't just a show.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people's lives, they're trying to just live the show, thinking that they're going to get something from out there that's going to give them the feeling they're looking for in here. And it's all backwards. You have to become it in here and be able to be solid in yourself if you want to feel the world around you make any sense. It's not going to make sense from trying to get it out there. You have to line yourself up. You have to have that sense of congruence, that sense of real authentic integrity. And when you're trying to do that in a dom-sub relationship, you cannot do that if you are acting out your relationship based on a set of rules that you didn't decide for yourself, that don't fit you, but you're just trying to do what you think a dom is supposed to do, and you're trying to get her to do what you think a sub is supposed to do. If you haven't made the dynamic real for you, then it's just a waste of your time.
And it needs to be, like you just said, it needs to be in alignment with your core values. If your relationship is not reflective of who you are in the rest of your life and your core values, then there's an incongruency. And I think what it is saying, hey, I've got these core values. This is who I am. This is what I believe in. This is what I'm about. Apply that to the relationship and what your values are.
Yeah. If you're not living an integrated life, you can't live in integrity. So what does integrated mean? It means I'm the same person in my relationship and in my work and in my social life. Like I'm me, and then I'm showing up in all of these places. But if it's like I'm trying to do the relationship like this and then be like this at work and be like this with my friends and be like this with my family, you've got all these different fake selves that you're trying to maintain. It's like you're juggling. This is something I'm really proud of with one of the things that I built for Infinite Devotion, which is a course called Structuring Your DS Dynamic. I walk people through how to line up your relationship with your internal integrity and how to build a contract and make rules and set up relationship rituals, not based on what you're supposed to do, but things that actually fit you and your life.
Where do you start with that? If you were somebody was just fresh and maybe they've never thought about this before, what's step one?
Deep conversations, like really vulnerable, deep, open conversations about why do you want to do this? What do you think you're going to get out of it? What is it going to take? What are you going to have to be able to let go of? What's going to be hard for you? Why do we want this in our relationship? What are we wanting to let go of in our relationship in order to make these dynamics work? Like really deep, vulnerable conversations. And frankly, where a lot of people go wrong with this in a new DS dynamic is that they start out and go, okay, now we're dom sub, and now we're going to figure out how to structure the relationship. And then they're already trying to squeeze themselves into these identities of what they think a dominant is or a submissive is. And they're negotiating the consent-based side of this dynamic from inside of an internal posture of playing a role. So we have to negotiate things like limits and rules and desires and all of that stuff. We have to negotiate that, and we have to have conversations about that outside of these roles. So that when we come into and try to settle into these polarity dynamics, we try to settle into these dominant submissive dynamics, now we're doing it from a place of having been fully open and vulnerable. If we're trying to negotiate from the place, okay, I'm the dom, now I'm supposed to dom this dynamic, and she's like trying to figure out what it means to be a sub while she's also speaking up for what she needs out of being a sub. Like you're already out of vulnerability.
It feels like what you're saying there whenever I hear vulnerability talked about like that, to me, that's another way of saying it is empathy and like you have to be empathetic to the yourself and to her or him, to the other person. Like your their vulnerability, you've got to give a shit about. It's not, oh, just be vulnerable and then still fuck whatever they like. Don't even worry about what they say. It's actually listening to that person and caring about what that person is saying, and that is actually being integrated into the structure of the relationship and where it's going forward, rather than saying, here's an outside form and I'm going to apply that form to this with a disregard to the actuality of this person.
Yeah, and this is why, like, men, the dominant in these dynamics, has to go first in sorting yourself out, because to so many men, dominance equals this forceful kind of controlling, domineering energy. And I had a guy tell me one time, and as he was having his own awakenings about why this, like, how he had screwed this up in the past, his wife told him, or that she wanted him to be a dominant, that she wanted to be a submissive. And he said immediately when she said that, the first thing that he responded with was, okay, bitch, then go clean the fucking kitchen. And he, as he was telling me this, he was embarrassed, because he was like, he knew now how like insane that was. But this is the problem: if we don't sort ourselves out first about what it means to lead with strength rather than leading with force, then we're going to start out these dynamics. We'll start out in these relationships just hitting her like a fucking freight train of forcefulness, and that's not ever going to work.
And it might be appropriate if that's what you both are into and that's what's established, but to just run right into it with no empathy to yourself or to her, to that, is that actually the reality that you are wanting to construct? Yeah.
So that's why we have to be a little more intentional about the early stages of this.
Right.
Okay, so if she comes to you and says, hey, I want you to be my dominant, I want to be submissive to you, rather than saying, okay, bitch, go clean the fucking kitchen, what we're saying is, instead ask her, what does that mean to you? That sounds like it could be fun. That sounds like it could be exciting. What does it mean to you? What does it not mean to you? What excites you about it? What scares you about it? To really have some of those open conversations. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to do one of two things. You're going to act out what you've already preconceived the notion of dominance to be, inauthentic, or you are going to make assumptions about what she means about what dominance is, and you're going to try to jump into that, so inauthentic. The only way you can get to authenticity in these dynamics is through vulnerability.
100%. Another way of saying vulnerability is that which the other person might appear to be weak or appear to not fit the form that you think that it is.
How about this also as a little context for vulnerability? The potential of being rejected. Correct.
And I think for men, it's often weak. For women, it could be strong. Like their vulnerability is sometimes their voice, their strength comes off, because that could be rejected by the man. So how do you integrate these parts of us that don't necessarily fit in the stereotype or in the form that we're establishing?
To me, that even gets at a deeper concept, which is collectivism versus individuality. Because we tend to, as humans, because of our social tribal nature, we tend to look at things, we tend to group things, we group think, we tend to try to identify ourselves with groups, and then we abandon our individuality, our authenticity, for the values of the collective. But the problem is then you have a collective of people who have all abandoned their authenticity. You have nothing that's real. You only have this false identity of the group, and groups can't have an identity because groups are made up of individuals, and every one of those individuals is unique. So this is why I think all of the problems of humanity essentially boil down to adapting collectivist ideologies versus finding comfort with individualistic ideologies, my own unique expression, and then being able to be in my own unique expression and also accept the unique expression of everyone else. Patriarchy doesn't actually exist. It's a bunch of individual people who have made a bunch of individual actions that are getting grouped together into one grand narrative. Now, a lot of similarities. Yeah, sure. Can you solve it? Only on an individual level. You can only solve these things on an individual level. You can't create a different collective to fight back against a different collective because you just created the same problem differently. So I think what you're getting at there really hints at this bigger thing that I've been looking at for probably the last 20 years, which is, like, what does it mean to really be an individual as a human? What does it mean to be a unique individual as a human? And that's why authenticity, like, everything to me comes down to authenticity. Everything in life does, because it all comes back to individuality.
How do you feel different when you say you're not a part of the community?
For one, I don't boss Don around. I don't use force at all in our dynamic. I've developed and cultivated a dynamic where there's deep respect, so that there's no force that's used or necessary at all. And another place, and this is a part, I think, of why our infinite devotion business has stood out so much over the years. Why people seem to be drawn to us is we don't dress the part. We don't look the part. We don't try to act like or look like we are dom and sub.
Except the collar.
But that's even that, like, the collar is a part of what's so stark when Dawn wears her collar, because she's dressing in just like cute, pretty dresses or whatever. She dresses kind of like a Sunday school teacher. And then the collar stands out, and it's a very stark contrast to the rest of the aesthetic, to the point that it makes people sometimes look and go, what did I just see there?
Right.
And it's the individuality, the uniqueness of how we do this and how we look and how we approach it and how we talk about it is what makes it stand out. Because if you're not being authentic, you're just blending in. And that's what most people want to do, is they want to fit in. They're afraid of standing out. They're afraid of being judged because they're different.
And what would you say is what makes your relationship DS?
I lead every single corner of our lives. Like, I make every decision. Dawn follows every decision that I make. What makes it DS is what we've had to do under the surface to get to a point where I actually feel solid and grounded and confident enough to make those decisions without worrying about whether or not I'm pleasing her or upsetting her, and what she's had to go through in order to be able to let go of control enough and trust enough that she can just quote unquote blindly follow. Because it's not blindly following, it is years of cultivated trust and respect that allow her to follow that completely. So it's just beyond the realm of command and obey to a deeper level of lead and follow with totality. And there's really deep surrender on her part to essentially trusting that I'm going to take care of her, because she has to be able to let go of trying to take care of herself.
Mm-hmm.
If she really wants to experience the freedom of submission, which is the freedom of giving herself to me and saying, do what you please with me,
Mm-hmm.
she has to know that what I'm going to do with her isn't going to hurt her, damage her, destroy her, that it's going to look out for her, it's going to protect her, provide for her, take care of her, love her, and also give her then the experience of the freedom of not having to be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
But she can't really let that go until there's a really deep amount of trust. So that's why these things, like, sure, bedroom dynamics, kink dynamics, fun, exciting, play with that all you want. We certainly do. But you can't use that same sort of command and obey thing that might work in the bedroom when it comes to bitch, go clean the fucking kitchen. Then you're just projecting your own internal wounding onto her. I think any time that we desire authenticity, whether it's in our relationship or in our work or in anything else, all we have to be willing to do is accept things where they are and be willing to question our preconceived notions.
Yes, that's it right there.
Be willing to question the assumptions or the beliefs that we have. And an example in what I heard you say is when you say there's no part of her that doesn't want to be out in the world working. And that very well may be true. But that's a great example of a preconceived notion or an assumption that just has to be willing, it has to be on the table to be questioned and to be reassessed as time goes by, because it may be true. But if we don't question it, we don't really know if it's true. And so we have to be willing to look inside of ourselves and see the different places where am I assuming that something is the truth. The things that I'm not willing to question are usually where I can see deeper into finding the truth. And we have to be willing to do that if we want to get to really deep authenticity.
Yeah. We've definitely had those conversations, and I think bringing it all up to look at it and not have a cherished outcome with it all. Be, like you just said, be willing to let go of how it is. And I think that word cherished outcome, I think that phrase is really helpful, because I think sometimes we have these unconscious cherished outcomes. This is what we think it should be or what our life should be, but are we willing to give it all up and see a new way? And I think she's definitely brought that forward. And to me, it's her creation, it's her art, it's her way of expressing. It's an expression. And I think you've talked a lot about the feminine expression. And so to me, I see Arosha as her opportunity to bring that expression out there. And then as I become a part of Arosha and it becomes part of my journey to shepherd that and to tend that and to be a steward of Arosha. And I think that word stewardship is a really wonderful word, because that's, to me, another example of how to be stewardship is taking ownership and responsibility for that which we have is in our care.
I have women who come to me all the time and say they take some of the things that I say and teach around submission as a state of physical surrender and living from a state of being and living out of an authentic expression. They take that to mean, oh, so you mean I can't work? Oh, so you think women can't work, Andrew? Is that what you're saying? Women shouldn't have a job? And my first thought is, if you're that resistant to that idea, you're defending, there's some defensiveness in you. And why are you feeling such a need to defend it? Because, of course, anyone can do work. We need to do work as human beings. It's a part of, we work to provide and take care of ourselves, right? It's a part of the exchange of energy. It's just where is that work coming? And it's a big shift for a lot of women. And I think this is a part of what makes Rachel really unique, is I think she's understood this for a long time, that she can't just work from a state of forcefulness and then expect to be in a state of receptivity at the same time. So, like, where is the work coming from? Are you putting that, as a submissive, as a woman, are you putting that work out from yourself, from a place of having first slowed down, taken care of yourself, tended to yourself, and then taken action from a state of fullness? Or are you just driving towards outcomes?
Right. And for me, witnessing her work is actually part of taking care of herself. Like, she loves it so much. That is her expression. It's her art. She's an artist. That's where this was all birthed from, is her art. And I think art is a great word to encapsulate the form that we create. And I think when we create form that's authentic, to me, that is art. That's what art is. It's an authentic form that has a purpose that's not just monetary. And you might get paid for it, but it's not necessarily why you're doing it.
I want to come back to something pick up a train of thought we were on a little bit earlier here. And this comes back to one of my favorite books, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. My favorite character in that book is actually one of the side characters. And his name is Hugh Axton. He's the professor of philosophy that taught John Galt and Francisco d'Anconia and Ronyar Daneshald in college. And he makes the statement several times in the book where he says, there are no contradictions in life. If you arrive at a contradiction, you have to question your premises. Question your premises. What's the premise on which you've decided that you've come to a contradiction? This is where a lot of times we start to, I think, as humans, we start to put ourselves in these boxes. When something doesn't make sense, we make the assumption that we're the ones that don't get it and that everybody else has it figured out. And we start to adopt external ways of being because of our discomfort with challenging our cherished outcomes, our preconceived notions, the premises, the building blocks that we've built our life, or our mindset, or the mental framework that we approach life from. We have to be willing to question everything down to why is this the way that it is? So for example, if you are a dominant and you want to be a dominant, and you want to be a dominant in this relationship, and then it also doesn't feel good to you to be forceful and to be a jerk and to be a dick to the woman that you love. And so, like, a lot of guys have this internal contradiction, right? Between I love her and I also want to be in control and be in charge and lead, but those two things don't feel like they go together. Well, you have some sort of an inauthentic premise. So you have to be willing to question, why does being a dominant mean I have to be forceful? Or why do I even want to be in charge in the first place? What am I getting out of it? You have to go deeper. And you can't get to authenticity just taking the easy route. It's gonna suck. Question those deeper premises and those deeper assumptions about what is this? Why is it like this?
And it's going to be really uncomfortable. I think part of it that I want to preface, coming out of that is uncomfortable. I think we don't recognize the comfort that we find in fitting into the norms. And when we really have to claim our authenticity, I know for me, it was very uncomfortable to realize, oh my God, I don't fit in the norm of what I thought a DS should look like. I felt like I was doing it all wrong, and I'm a hypocrite. And how can I be on this podcast because I have this powerhouse woman who's not just in a surrendered space all the time, but she's actually out in the world killing it. And that's a contradiction. And how can I be a dom when that's happening?
How can I be a dom if I'm not always wearing a suit in black and white pictures with my submissive on her knees 24 hours a day, looking up at me like a groveling, helpless.
And I'm also reactive and expressive and emotional and all these things. And I think an artist, and a lot of things, you just are like, how does this all fit together? And I think this is where, when we have these 6 pillars, why it's so fucking important as part of the authenticity is to bring consciousness to it. Like, the whole fucking point is to be aware of who you are, who she is, and to take responsibility for yourself and all of you, and herself and all of her. And when you can choose, when you start not being reactive, but accentuating that period of time where that space between reactivity and response, and you accentuate that, and you choose that moment, and you can rewire that moment. There's nothing more hot and sexy to a woman than you being able to own your responses and own who you are, and to do it from an authentic dick space, from the space down here in your solar, that's just this authentic space. And authenticity isn't, I'm pissed and I'm whiny. So you're allowed to feel those things. But if you start just reacting in that sort of way, that's actually often a triggered response. And start learning about your triggered responses and your relationship dynamic, that maybe you're anxious, or maybe you're avoidant, or maybe you're at least one of those, anxious, avoidant, or whatever the fuck you are, or what's your love language, like all this stuff that's out there that you haven't brought attention to yourself to realize that, hey, there are vulnerable parts of myself, there are parts of myself that feel weak, there are parts of myself where I have feelings, an interior life. And until you navigate that and feel that and own that and include that in the form, those become Achilles heels. They become places where the relationship breaks down and the dynamic breaks down, and where she starts to look and feel like, and you start becoming attuned to her. You're realizing, oh my God, she's doing this from obligation. She's doing this from a forcing place. She's not actually in her truth. If that's not actually going to be sustainable over time. And I think that's where this journey for me has been really a journey that's much more akin to a martial arts practice, or a yoga practice, or some practice where you have a relationship with every day. You're striving. There's a movement towards authenticity, rather than you're just like, I am fucking done. I'm complete. I've got control. I'm over it. There's always a bit of this beginner's mind quality to it.
So if a guy wants to start looking deeper and to start trying to find what is my real authentic self, here's a great question you can ask yourself. When you're uncomfortable, ask yourself, what if this isn't the problem? What if this is a symptom? Mm-hmm. So just ask that question, right? So if I am like really annoyed with the way that she does something, what if that feeling of annoyance that I have, like I'm the one feeling annoyed, what if that isn't a problem that's being caused by what she's doing, but what if this is a symptom of something deeper? If this were a symptom, just give yourself the opportunity, give it a chance to be something other than being caused by something outside of yourself. Give yourself an opportunity to look at it and say, okay, if this were a symptom, if this was coming from somewhere inside of me, where might that be? Just ask yourself that question. If feeling this way was a symptom of a deeper issue, of a deeper problem, what might that deeper problem be?
That's a deep question. And I think if this relationship and this dynamic isn't changing you and really bringing stuff up that's challenging to yourself, then you're not doing it right. It should feel easy all the time. It should be something that asks of you to step into your authenticity. Like you're stepping into something that is a higher version of yourself. And I think we did a whole thing on this book where we had the 4 agreements. And one of the whole premises of that book is this notion that you are conditioned in life. Like you're making an agreement that's like a false self. And stepping into your true self is really truly being impeccable. That's the impeccability. That's the authenticity. And I think a lot of times we go through making assumptions about what a DS looks like, or what a relationship should look like, or how we should be in the relationship. And these insidious kind of unconscious patterns that we have, look, it's an issue. Like if you're getting triggered, that's often meaning there's some unconscious pattern that you're unaware of. And so start paying attention to it. And I think that's what you're saying is like, there's symptom, there's something else that's underneath it.
Yeah. And real authenticity means being yourself. And I think the problem that a lot of people have then is they think that they already know who they are.
Right.
They haven't questioned if I'm actually not just this version of me that has all of these preconceived notions, beliefs, assumptions, premises, that has everything all figured out. If this isn't me, but this is just what I've grown into this thus far, who am I really? You can't, like, being authentic means being who you really are, not who you think you are. And most people are just being who they think they are, who they've thought their way into being.
Yeah. Said. And I think when you're up in your mind about it all the time, that's the problem. The problem is be in your mind, but also be in your body and have a dialogue, feel it in your body. Like the whole point of this too, it should be pleasurable. There is challenges to the whole situation, but the whole point of this dynamic should feel good. That's part of the authenticity too, is that it's pleasurable.
And it's moving towards feeling good, right? Like you said, It's not going to feel good all the time.
Right.
And it won't feel good all the time, but it should feel like you are becoming more of yourself.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that we have to get past, is that becoming more of yourself means challenging who you think you are. It doesn't just mean reaffirming. It's not just making yourself right. It's being willing to be wrong about who you think you are and how you think you're supposed to be. If being wrong means you get closer to the truth, to what's real. So that's my calling to men, is question yourself. Be willing to question yourself. Don't be afraid of questioning yourself.
Those moments of inquiry, those moments where your sense of self gets rocked and who you are, sometimes you might need to talk to someone. And this is where you come in. This is where I come in. There are people out there that I think it's very, very important and valuable. And I know for myself to have conversations with other men and with other people about these kind of things. Because if we're always just in our head, I think sometimes we can get stuck in patterns. And I think dislodging those patterns and the process of it, if we're always processing with our woman, it's not exactly the dynamic. Like it's
Yeah, you've got to have other good men in your life, and you need some
right,
other examples of
right,
what it looks like to be a man other than just what you've surrounded yourself with thus far.
right.
It's one of the things I love about every Wednesday morning. I do a group call for the guys who are a part of one of my courses called Becoming a Dominant Man.
Mm-hmm.
And this call, we have dozens of guys who show up every single Wednesday morning on this call to basically learn something about themselves, to question themselves, to question the way that they show up in their relationships. And it gives them a different set of eyes, a different group of people with which they can look at themselves and maybe see themselves differently.
Mm-hmm. That's really that's awesome.
You have to have nothing changes until you change something. If you just keep going through the same motions, talking to the same people, surrounding yourself with the same, like if you keep everything the same, everything stays the same. Nothing changes until we change something.
And that change too is a big part of it. She's changing, you're changing. How do you deal with change? How do you deal with that's part of the authenticity to authentically deal with that. Our world right now is a lot of change. There's a lot of rapid change. And this is where we need to have these values, these certain things that don't change. And then you apply that to this. So that's where, how do we provide ourselves with an authentic space? I think is really to be, what's our lens, and letting that lens be alive, and that sometimes we need to re-examine it as well. Yeah. I appreciate you. Thank you for our chat, looking at this. We're always looking at it from different angles and coming at it, but I think it was.
It's important to always evaluate yourself, and I think that's a big part of what this whole podcast is about, and these conversations we have is giving both ourselves and other people then through these conversations an opportunity to see themselves differently. I always appreciate it. I always come away with something for me to look at for myself too. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Enjoy Texas.
See you next time, brother.
Yeah, good to see you.